The one thing that gets you confidence in interviewing, talking on the mic, is just doing it.
That's obviously a man of passion. So how did you get into music? Where did that start?
One of my first tours where I was the front of house guy was with a country band, and I did not enjoy their music at all. A performance that is electric is the bar for entry.
Futurepreneurialship has granted you this opportunity to start a studio. Bring us back when I was in grade 12. Not sure what I want to do. Certain that I don't want to work. Certain that I don't want to work.
You need skill to get there, and nothing else matters until you have that skill. If you're looking to start a passion business, then be willing to sacrifice everything in service of your passion.
My biggest issue that I find I'm running into with this podcast is a massive, unprecedented lack of confidence. Like, when it comes to music and when it comes to other content and stuff, I have gotten to the point where it's very easy to say if people don't like it, whatever.
Right.
But there are two ways to look at podcasting for me as someone who's just starting, and there's entertainment and then there's value. And so if I cut out all the stops and all the pauses and breaths and all that.
I just want to double check that it actually sounds like...
No worries, yeah.
Oh yeah, perfect.
So you're hearing me though. There's entertainment, which is cutting out all the gaffes, and then there's really the feeling of comfort. There's that feeling of being there. You know what? I'm going to aim for minimal cuts with this episode just because we're talking about it.
I wouldn't worry about it too much. I mean, the one thing that gets you confidence in interviewing, talking on the mic, is just doing it. Right? There's nothing that compares to just going through the process again and again and again.
I think the ambience of being in the studio as well is definitely going to help everything. And With that, what a great transition. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Pursuit of Motion. We are in scorching Edmonton, Alberta, middle of the summer, and we are in Two Bodies of Water Studios. Now, for those of you unfamiliar, which would probably be all of you, this is where I basically learned the foundations of the music that I make now. Before I came here, I knew how to turn on a microphone and record, and beyond that, I had practically no abilities other than the musical ones. I didn't know any of the technical stuff. So, James Seabrook, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for having me.
This is a great place. When we first met, we were actually in another studio.
Yeah.
And so our first encounter was moving that studio over to here.
Yeah, that was the first thing we did together was move an entire studio in a small car. I think I made 150 trips back and forth between that place and this place. And you helped me set everything up, helped me wire everything together. It was quite the introduction.
It was great. And I remember, and I want to talk about this space in particular, but one of the first interactions we ever had, and it was a slight point of contention, but I think it really sort of undergirds our whole relationship, is right first day I brought a massive boom box to the studio, and I hadn't even asked. I just turned it on and I started playing hip hop for us, because in my mind I thought, okay, this isn't a hip hop studio. And this is an excellent way to show James my flavor. And within an hour, we were arguing about hip hop and and you know, the different forms of music. And I think debate is one of the major themes of, you know, learning. So I appreciated that. But
I think it's also one of the major themes of our relationship.
For sure.
Like,
yeah.
We've had a lot of like good, hearty debates. I know for certain I've raised my voice in your direction a number of times.
I know for certain I've lost debates a number of times as well. Yeah, that's one of the best ways to learn is by having the kitchen sink thrown at you and realizing you can't defend it. But this space, we moved here, but this is your space. I want to ask about the intention of design, because when you first moved in here, none of these beautiful walls, as you all saw in the intro, were as they were. I know that there are specifics as far as angle of design, so I'd love to know what went into the thought of this place.
Well, one of the problems with my previous studio was a lack of a acoustical considerations, and I won't get too technical with your audience, but when I built this one, I knew I wanted it to sound more useful in from a studio perspective, and so I actually got in touch with a studio designer down in LA and got some construction advice and some design considerations, and and then we built this room specifically with those considerations in mind, and it turned out so much better than the old place. So many fewer challenges as far as listening and critiquing and sonic analysis and all of the technical stuff that goes into music production in general. Yeah.
Yeah, in the old studio, in the few, maybe a week that I was there was this amazing sound like effect where there was a crooked hallway. And I remember if somebody spoke in the main control room, you could hear them in the bathroom, or it was the other way around. I can't remember.
It was the other way around. Yeah, if you were, what was it? It was 16 or 20 feet down the hallway, or even into the bathroom, you could hear it all the way down the hallway reflect off the wall into the control room door. It was really funny.
Yeah, which goes to show how potent like corners and angles and having the correct equipment is and really getting that proper sound. So you're the type of guy who's willing to construct his own studio, reach out to people from other nations to learn about their practices to optimize sound. That's obviously a man of passion. So how did you get into music? Where did that start?
Right back to the beginning. Hey, okay.
Yes, please.
So I didn't really pay attention. Music was always just around when I was a kid, but it wasn't a real factor in anything that I did or anything that my family was involved in. And so when my cousin at 14 started playing guitar, I got jealous. And I suddenly wanted to play guitar. So I convinced my parents to get me a crappy, like 50-year-old broken guitar. And I played on that for 3 months, which gave them this indication that, yeah, this kid is serious about music. And it was through that experience, the cut hands, the constantly having it in around and learning new things, and that made me realize music really is something to love, which I just never considered before. And so take that into high school, because that was just before high school. Take that into high school, and I just wanted to be a rock star.
Who doesn't?
Exactly, right. But by the end of high school, I realized I wasn't good enough to be a professional musician, and so I started looking at all these other options. I hadn't really discovered the studio yet, but the vague idea of being in a recording studio appealed to me, and so I started pursuing that. I got into a radio production program because that's all I could afford as a teenager, and that got me into the studio using microphones, using mixing boards, and just getting familiar with the small studio idea. And then I started working on the road, touring with bands as a PA tech and as a monitor guy, and doing some front of house work, and that just kind of grew into, I think by the time I was 30, I was finally starting to put together my own plan to have a studio, and that became the old place, which then became this place.
Touring as an artist is, the dream for so many of us. How far did you travel?
As an artist specifically, or as a technician?
Let's say, like, in the extent of your career as a technician and an artist.
Okay. As an artist, I never really got outside of Western Canada. Um, as a technician, was all over Western Canada, the northwestern states, um, some central Canada, although strangely I never made it as far as Toronto. Um, and yeah, it was artists like, so that was the 90s. So it was a lot of artists that likely you wouldn't have heard of, but um, like Jason McCoy, who then went on to become part of the Roadhammers. No,
No.
um, yeah, uh, the Venga Boys. I did a couple of dates with them. I did 3 dates as a PA tech with Nazareth.
Really?
Yeah, and that might be the biggest artist I've worked with. Um, and then a whole bunch of dates with like Trooper, and April Wine, so like some classic rock, some other classic rock stuff. This was the 90s though, so the 70s wasn't that far away, right? So um, they were still going hard.
And I mean, I can imagine it would be a dream, especially in the genre of music that you enjoy listening to, presumably.
I I'm not certain that I worked more than a handful of artists that I actually enjoyed. Like Trooper is a great example. I did not enjoy Trooper when I started working with them, but getting to know the crew, getting to know the band, um, they became an artist that I really appreciated, and then I started to enjoy a lot of the music, and most of it was music that doesn't get played on the radio as a rule, and so I'd never really heard. Um, but yeah, most of the music that I worked with was not music that I, especially at the time, enjoyed at all, which I think really helped me focus on the technical stuff. One of my first tours where I was the front of house guy was with a country band, and I did not enjoy their music at all. But it gave me an opportunity to listen to instruments and and make them work better together, and and learn how to deal with difficult personalities, and um, and follow songs and progressions, and and when a band starts jamming, being able to follow that along and make the appropriate moves in real time. You know, that kind of stuff kind of only happens through working on the road. And if you enjoy the music too much, it's so much harder to focus on the technical aspects because I mean, maybe not for everybody, but I'm such an emotional music reaction person. If I love the music too much, I'm going to lose myself in the music, and I will forget that the world exists. Even if the mix is terrible, if I'm connecting with the song, if I'm connecting with the artist, then yeah, I'll forget. I'll forget where I am.
Especially if the performer is electric. Like if they're really putting on a good show,
Well,
I can
that's
imagine it's distracting.
that's a part of it for sure. Um, but it's the whole package that the performer can't just be electric. If the performer is electric but the song sucks, then it doesn't matter that the performance is electric. That's a memorable performance and a forgettable song, which equals only half. It's only half as memorable.
Yeah.
But if the song is a part of what you're connecting with, and I look at it, and this is something we may talk about later, but I look at a performance that is electric is the bar for entry. And I don't mean that to dismiss everyone else, but that is kind of what the expectation of an artist should be, is the performance should be memorable, and then you add in a song that is exceptional. And too many artists don't realize how boring of a performer they are. They and so many of them, so many artists even think that they're being captivating when they just don't understand what actual captivating performances feel like. They can see it on someone else, but to embody it, I mean, this is why actors spend so much time training in acting to become so good. And certainly there are some that just have it naturally, but a performer, a musical performer, needs that same ability to be electric, or it's just never going to be as good as they think it is.
I agree completely. I agree completely. The standards for performance need to be very high because it's like you said, you can't, that is the baseline. If you're not entertaining, why are
Yeah.
you an entertainer? 100%. And hip hop, I think, is personally, I'll say, like the worst for this. Like, I've heard the sentiment of most performances, especially living in Halifax or living near Halifax over the last few years. A lot of the rappers that have come through, nothing but complaints from my friends who shell out the money to go see it. So, yeah, it is. It's very important. One thing I will move back to slightly is I think every artist knows that monetizing creative capacity is a long road. So you said by your 30s you were out working with these groups on the road and doing live performances? No?
No, I was all doing that by the time I was 20.
Oh, 20.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's yeah, so it was 30 before I was comfortable taking the financial risk of starting a business. But most of my touring was in my late teens and early 20s.
Okay, so that's what I'll build on.
Sure.
How did you put yourself in a position where you could fund your passion, try and start a studio?
Oh, I lost my job. Plain and simple, the recession of 2008. I lost my job again, and 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 I realized I'm 30, or maybe I was almost 30, and I have been trying to do everything but the thing that I really want to do. And so, like most things in my life, I'm um, I'm on the phone with someone at Employment Canada, um, talking about my EI check or whatever it was that I was talking about, and I'd been talking with the same girl over and over again, and flirting with her, of course, because that's what I do. And she mentioned something about a small business startup program to help people who are specifically unemployed or have recently lost their jobs start a small business. And all the flirting stopped, and I was just laser focused on everything that she had to say from that point on. And I got myself into a small business startup program. Um, Spent 2 months in class developing an idea with other people that were similar situation as me, and trying to start their own businesses. Wrote a business plan, um, found startup loans, and then started a studio. And had it not been for that moment, that chain of events, I don't think I would have had the courage to go through it. Um, and I want to shout out a couple of businesses if
Please
I
feel
can.
free.
The Micro Business Training Center.
I just moved that.
Oh yeah, the Micro Business Training Center, and Futurepreneur. Uh, Futurepreneur is a small business startup nonprofit that connects startups or potential entrepreneurs with mentors, and they help you write business plans. They help you connect with potential funding agencies, and it's just a wonderful program. Awkward name, Futurepreneur is an awkward name, and I've complained about that to them many times. But it's a wonderful program, and it's designed for young adults. So their target is like 20s, and they won't fund anybody older than 39, I think. Um, but it's just a fantastic organization.
That's awesome, and that's still active.
Yeah.
Huh. That's a great resource. I'm gonna make sure I get some links for that in the bio.
In the show notes, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure that's available.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look into that myself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
As a futurepreneur myself.
That's such a terrible name.
So futurepreneurialship has granted you this opportunity to start a studio.
Yeah.
And this is where Two Bodies of Water came to fruition. What does that name mean? I know what the name means, but just for people, Two Bodies of Water, what is that?
Oh, it's really just a play on my last name. My last name is Seabrook. I look at the camera for that, Seabrook, which was two bodies of water. I got tired of people misspelling it, so I toyed around with the idea for a while with that. When they'd look at me crazy, like, how do you spell that? And I'd be like, it's two bodies of water. And so I really liked the ring of it, and it became the studio name.
It is a great name, and the logo is really nice as well.
Logo was designed by my cousin, Byron Ellis, who is the lead singer of Creature Conspire.
Shout out to Byron Ellis and Creature Conspire.
Yeah.
Shout out to Byron.
He did that. He and I went back, and he's a design guy, and he and I went back and forth for months on different variations of a logo, and he got frustrated one night and just two swoops of lines and sent it to me, and I said, "This is perfect. This is great." And he's like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Can I swear on this? Are you kidding me?" You can bleep it out.
Yeah. Thanks to your tutelage, I now have the skills to beep out curse words. Yeah.
So it's stuck since day one.
Yeah. So what did that first 6 months look like? Starting your own business, new to entrepreneurship.
I had just spent close to $108,000 on starting the business, from equipment to construction costs to getting licenses to do stuff to I signed a lease at a place that my business wasn't allowed to be, and so the city rejected my business license, and so that cost me 2 months of downtime. I made in that first year about $4,000. So it was stressful. I opened 6 months late based on my original business plan. I opened 6 months late, missed out on a lot of clients that I had lined up for those 6 months. And everything was kind of a scramble after that. And I basically did everything I could just to keep the doors open long enough to get the business coming in, to network, to convince people to give me a shot. Because I was relatively, prior to that, I'd been mostly working outside of town with touring artists, and so I didn't really have much of a local reputation. I wasn't part of the local scene all that much, and so it was, it was let's just say those first 6 months, I'm lucky that I survived. That's really what it comes down to.
So, can you explain to me a little bit more about the mindset? How did you endure?
Oh, sure. Well, because I was in my 30s at this point, and I think I was 31 by the time the studio actually opened. And I knew that this was my last chance to do something that I loved. And I had it in the back of my mind that if I couldn't make this happen, then I was just going to go into the trades, make a lot of money, and hate my life, but not have to worry about money. And so I had this mindset that there is no other option because I don't want to work in the trades. I don't want to hate my life. I don't want to even consider that as a serious option. So whatever I needed to do, whatever I needed to consider, um, I mean, it was normal for me to put in 100-hour work weeks. Um, I developed 3 cavities. Yeah.
So this was a stressful time, but really,
Well, it didn't feel stressful, even though like looking back, there was so much stress. Never had prior to that, I'd never experienced stress in the same way. Um, but it didn't feel stressful going through it. It was just kind of think of head down and plow through every obstacle. Something new comes up, I find a way around, over top, or right through. And as soon as I'm done getting through that one, the next obstacle comes up. And I think the first 3 years I was open, I would have a monthly panic right in the middle of the month, knowing that I don't have enough money in the bank account to pay for rent at the start of the next month. And I would have 2 or 3 days where I would just feel, you know, the anxiety. I didn't understand what to call it back then, but that's really what it was. It's just this extra anxiety around everything. And it was just a matter of, okay, I have to call people. I have to network people. There's a show I can go to because I don't have a gig. And it was just constantly that kind of thing. And inevitably by the end of the month, I'd have enough money to pay the rent. And so I'd be able to continue, and that I swear that was 3 years, the first 3 years I was open. And I started this whole thing in 2010, and it wasn't until late 2013 that I started having enough money in the bank to pay for next month's rent at the beginning of this month,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, business trial by fire.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I made it to 5 years, the number of people that were just amazed that happened seemed to come from everywhere.
How high were you on that list?
I just assumed it would happen.
Nice.
Like that was the oblivious mindset that I think helped me get through all those years. And even COVID, where all of the shutdowns and all that, I always assumed that there is going to be a tomorrow until something comes along and proves to me that there isn't. And so I never had a defeatist mentality, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It was always just possibilities, and it's going to happen, and I just haven't figured out how to do it yet. And of course, living like that for the past almost 15 years now, there's, I'm just used to living with a higher stress level than the average person. But I think that's small business, it doesn't help that small business in the artistic community, which makes it even tougher especially when money gets tough for everybody. But yeah, it's there was never a doubt. It was just a new challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So mentioning COVID brings us closer towards our time period.
Sure.
So I'll tell a short story here. Bring us back when I was in grade 12. Not sure what I want to do. Certain that I don't want to work. Certain that I don't want to work. I don't want to go get a liberal education, get liberalized, because I wasn't I wasn't in the right mindset. I was an arrogant young 12th grader, as many of us are,
Yeah.
big and strong in the gym and doing my thing, feeling good. And my parents, when I was young, they weren't super on board with the music because, you know, you find your 15-year-old's notebook and it's a whole manner of curse words and speaking about things they've never experienced. I can imagine no parent is thrilled by that.
Yeah.
But, you know, once, sort of like you said, where you proved over time that you really were committed to making music, it was the same deal. And by grade 12, my parents both knew how passionate I was and how much I cared. And one day my mom sent me a link to Recording Connection.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the program that I took after high school. And essentially, it is a mentorship program, kind of like a trade school type deal where I came and this was my first experience around small business. This is where I shadowed and maybe mentored under you for about 6 months. Something like that, just pre-COVID. And so, you know, big shout out to my mom for putting this together. Big shout out to Recording Connection for offering opportunities like that. Before we talk about mentorship, how did that happen? How were you able to connect with this, you know, multinational music teaching program?
You know what? It was one of their students that found me. The Recording Connection, based out of LA, they had a partnership with a different studio in town, and the owner of that studio had just had another kid, and the studio itself was having flooding problems, and so the student didn't feel like he was getting enough attention at the studio, and the school said, "Well, if you want to change to a different studio, go find one." And I was the only studio that he talked to that was interested. And I've been with the Recording Connection ever since.
So they're still active as well?
Yeah.
Cool. And so essentially, just to break it down for the listener, just in case anyone's interested, it was a pricier program. I can't remember how much it was, but it was in place of any sort of other post-secondary education that I was doing. And really, it's sort of two sets of educational stuff available for you to learn from. So there'll be slideshows that courses at home basically that you learn, and then you'll do quizzes, and then you actually have the in-studio work, which there's a checklist of how many hours you're supposed to do, but we circumvented that almost entirely. Hours we kind of just worked. It was more come to the studio rather than...
I let you be an adult and decide how much time you wanted to invest in the mentorship side of it. And I think if you went back and added up all the hours that you spent here, you'd be where you needed to be, right? But yeah, it's a correspondence course with a mentorship section is really how the course is classified. This is not the kind of thing you can learn on your own easily.
Not easily. That's the right way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, YouTube has all the same information, but
6 months or 5 years.
Yeah. And that's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
But the school put together a really good curriculum, and having the opportunity to be in the studio and to work with real microphones, and you sat in on a lot of client sessions and got to participate in those, not just watch videos of people. Anyway, yeah, the school's great.
It was a great opportunity for me, and I graduated pretty much. I finished my final, and then COVID was not a week later. It was uncanny timing.
Yeah. It's worth noting the school is about $10,000 US less than most equivalent programs. Specifically because it's correspondence plus mentorship rather than in-class, in-facility kind of programs.
It was worth every dime. I don't want to paint a picture like it was not worth the value.
Yeah. But that I think is one of the big selling points is the blend of all three of those, the well-written curriculum, the mentorship portion and the cheaper cost. I've worked with a lot of students that have come out of like OE Art or
Is it that Nimbus school in Vancouver?
Vancouver, yeah, yeah, and they're all significantly more expensive um, than this program, and they don't come out that they don't come out that different. You know, they come out with a little less client experience. They may come out with a little more like SSL console type of experience, but
Yeah, for that price tag, if someone were to ask me, which no one is asking me,
yeah,
go get a liberal arts education, go to business school. If you're going to pay for the education, go learn something. I think that it'll help develop you a little bit further. If there are alternatives such as the Recording Connection program, but that's my
yeah.
opinion, I guess.
I guess we're not here to talk about education.
Yeah. Well, in a way we are though, because just to transition, what
Hmm.
is your philosophy on mentorship?
Um, as much as people call me a philosophical person, I don't really think in terms of this is my philosophy of something. I think mentorship is good. I know, what a boring answer. Um, I think mentorship is really good for certain careers because there's a career like music. You can learn a lot of music theory and music technique, or even recording theory and recording technique. But you need a lot of real world experience for any of that to be applicable. Um, and you can say that with a lot of careers, really. No one wants a doctor that hasn't been at it for a few years at least, right? Um, so there's there's just a lot of value of learning from people who have made the mistakes before, and especially if a mentor is open-minded about doing things differently um, than they've done it in the past. I mean that was certainly something that you and I talked about a lot uh, was here's my way of doing it, but then you'd heard of this other way, or you were talking to another artist in town and they recorded this way or that way, or they were doing music this way or that way, and it was different than something that I had done. And so we'd had a lot of conversations like that. And I think that kind of thing is really valuable um, for growth as an artist. Yeah, I just think that that kind of thing is really valuable um, from a learning perspective because I mean I'm in my 40s and I still know that I can't make all the mistakes. you know, I'm so grateful for the older people throughout my life that have been willing to share their thoughts and their mistakes and their perspectives, and it just helps inform me about mine.
Those are the exact words that I would use to express my appreciation for this relationship as
Sweet.
well, by the way. Yeah, it's been a pleasure learning as much as I have. And so what sort of advice would you have for aspiring artists, people who, let's say someone who doesn't who was like me when I first got here, doesn't even know mixing and mastering exists, and then advice for an artist maybe more in my position where I feel like I've got the fundamentals down and now it's working on creating a sound and promoting it in a way that
So
people resonate with.
I'm of two minds of this. Um, I really think that more artists should focus on their musical skill development. And I don't mean recording, I don't mean mixing or anything to do with the studio. I mean the actual music side of it. And so that's um, if you are a singer, let's say a singer or a rapper or a combo, understanding music theory, being able to communicate in that language, being able to perform with your voice without the use of processing, uh, through through expressive and competent skill develop competently developed skills. Um, it's such an underappreciated side of the industry that you can't be an electric performer if you don't have the skills to back it up. You can be like a circus ringleader without music skills, and you can be a captivating speaker without music skills, but you can't be a music performer without good music skills. And the people that we think are just okay, that are in the public sphere, have so much more musical skill than the average person trying to do music. And especially, I shouldn't say this. This probably been just as dismissed when I was your age, but developing musical skill, I think, is the number one thing any artist should be focusing on. Nothing else matters until you have that. Unless your goal is just to be an Instagram star, and then you don't need any skill. You just need to manipulate the algorithm. Um, and that's a whole different thing, right? Um, and there's lots of that.
It's perception and reality.
Perception and reality, exactly. If you want to be a Travis Scott, or if you want to be an Ariana Grande, or if you want to be a Celine Dion, who is now getting close to retirement, you need skill to get there, and nothing else matters until you have that skill. Everything is so much less important, and basically not important until you have the skill to accomplish the music side of it. And then when you have the music side, then everything else becomes important. Learning how to use a microphone, learning how to perform on stage and in the studio, even thinking about musical arrangements, and all that kind of stuff becomes secondary to your instrument or vocal musical skill, but then becomes necessary when you have the skill.
There's no point in becoming good at icing a cake if you can't bake it in the first place.
Yeah, if your cake is like soggy bread, I mean, what's the point of the icing, right?
Yeah. I guess some people will still eat it.
Yeah. I mean, and there are shows like those baking shows that like, how big of a disaster can we make this? You know. Yeah.
So now I'm going to ask a similar question, but
Sure.
slight transition. Now, forgetting about the artistry, as a small business owner, someone, same deal, someone who hasn't started a business, what's the advice that you would give?
Don't. That's the easy joke, but be willing to sacrifice everything to get there. Yeah, that's a tough one, because I have made a lot of mistakes, and I don't feel like I'm good at business. The fact that I'm still here is pretty remarkable. Um, but I've lost most of my friends, and I've developed a lot of new ones, but I lost most of my friends from before I started the business. Um, I work, I still work 80 hours a week as an average, for sure. Um, I've never made less money. Um, there's so many obstacles to having satisfaction. I mean, if you're looking to start a passion business, then be willing to sacrifice everything in service of your passion. If you're not, like when I was 25, I would have shut down the studio after those first 6 months because I just didn't care enough about it. Um, but if you're not willing to sacrifice everything, then you're probably not ready to dive into it. And that's more warning than advice, I guess. Maybe I should rethink all this. Um,
I
yeah.
think you've developed way too much skill to rethink all this.
Yeah. no. I rethink my answer.
Oh yeah, okay,
rethink
yeah.
my answer. Yeah, I mean, having a good, um, having a good eye for finance, and I don't mean like finance bro kind of finance. I mean like understanding accounting, understanding cash flows, even if at just a really basic level, understanding that stuff, that's really important. But above all, being passionate and being willing to sacrifice for and like true sac. I gave up my apartment. I sold almost everything I owned. I lived in my truck for almost 6 months just to make it through those first couple of years. Like I never would have done that in my 20s. But by the time I was 30, it just seemed like this is what I need to do.
Edmonton isn't a place that you want to live in your truck.
Yeah, it got cold when I got into October.
But it just goes to show that passion and that mindset. So thank you for breaking that down. So before we wrap up,
all right,
I would like to discuss your role on the team.
Sure, yeah.
Just make that a little bit more clear for the people listening. For those of you who have listened this far, thank you. So right now we're building something big. We, being myself and my team out at St. FX, Antigonish, Nova Scotia, we're building a label. Now, by the time that this episode has come out, the full launch will be up, website will be up, merch will be available. Go grab merch at paperchasers.ca. See, I'm doing this before the website's even up, so I'm manifesting sales. But we're really trying to take things to a more professional level. It's more than just making music. It's more than just content creation. It's entertainment broad scope, including things like this with Pursuit of Motion. So earlier, the analogy of baking the cake from 10 minutes ago, I think is the best one whenever I try and explain what mastering is.
Oh, okay.
Assume that you have the artist skills as we had just finished speaking about.
Yeah.
You're at that level where you're confident in your sound, and whether you guys feel that way about me, it does not matter. After 9 years, I'm pretty comfortable with this studio album. Oh, my album's out. Hey, what'd you guys think about my album? James mastered it. So once you have the sound where you want to go, and you get to bake in that cake, and you have it all mixed together in the bowl. You've got in this situation, your auto-tune, your EQ, you've edited the vocals. The song sounds right. All that's left is the baking. And that's the way that I've described mastering. It's the baking. It's the rising. Right? It's turning it from, this goop into that fully fledged, fluffy, full sound that everybody enjoys. Obviously, this is why you're the mastering engineer and not me, because my explanation isn't great. So please take it away.
I actually think that everything you've described so far should be part of mixing, right? Like when you're done mixing a song, it should check off all of those boxes.
Yes,
it should be full. It should be punchy. It should be in your face. It should be aggressive if you want aggression. It should be soft and smooth if you want it to be soft. All of that stuff should be done in mixing. And the mastering role, the role of mastering in this process should just be a technical one. Making the overall track, the overall song competitively loud, making sure that there's translation between, the studio speakers, the car stereo, the earbuds, the clock radio, making sure that it translates efficiently amongst those. But none of it should be part of baking a cake. Baking a cake, the whole analogy of baking the cake should be what mixing is.
Okay.
And mastering should be the quality check to make sure that the cake is good enough to go on display in your bakery, and if there's any little touch ups, maybe there's a little like a little, especially if you're doing like a really glamour cake, or like one of those really fancy YouTube cake makers, right? Maybe there's a tiny little fingerprint there, and so you just smooth that out to make it disappear. But you're not changing anything. You're just making sure that the mix is good enough to go to the radio, to go to the top playlists, to do all that kind of stuff. So mastering shouldn't be making the cake. It should be just quality control.
For those of you who appreciate meta narratives, me explaining what mastering is and then James taking it and making it better is fairly similar to what he would do with my version of the song, making sure that it's more accessible. Maybe is a way of putting it as well. Accessibility.
And I think that's what a lot of mastering engineers do these days, because there are so many artists that are self-mixing, like yourself and a lot of the people you collaborate with. You don't always have the budget to pay extra hundreds of dollars to have someone also mix it, but a mastering engineer is pretty affordable in the context. And so something that we've done on past records and on this record is I've taken your mix, I've given you some notes on how to improve it, little things to change, any obvious things that need to be changed. And you take those, you make some revisions, and you send it back. And then I'm really just polishing up things that you might have missed, or things that are things that are necessary to make sure that your vision can translate to all those places that we talked about before. And I think there's an element of like mix rescue in there, right? But at the end of the day, I'm not trying to make your song into something different. I'm trying to make your song just be its most presentable state. And so that's what mastering really is.
And I thank you for doing it.
You're welcome.
Because any of the songs that haven't been mastered are significantly less listenable than those that have been. And it's very obvious for those of you who listen to music and you're skipping, and all of a sudden a song is significantly more quiet. That's your number one. Immediately you should know, okay, this song probably hasn't been mastered, or at least not mastered well.
Or you don't have volume match on your Spotify turned on.
I don't use Spotify. For the listener. Yeah.
Spotify or Tidal or Apple Music or whatever it is you use, they all have a volume match. And if that's not turned on, then songs will be all over the place. Yeah, because there's no standard loudness for how loud a song is. It's just all over the place.
Well, James, Mr. James Seabrook from Two Bodies of Water Studios, Edmonton, Alberta. Any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to share with the audience?
No. I feel like this is the end of a Hot Ones episode. Like this camera.
Yeah.
Tell us what you have going on in your world.
I can't wait till we have multi angles. That's really going to elevate the podcast for sure.
Shit, man, we should have done that. I could have set up one of my cameras too.
Okay, let's run it back. Let's start it off the top.
Yeah, I think that's. I don't think there's anything. I'm assuming you're going to put twobodiesofwater.com website. Yeah.
I'll link your music as well. Despite the Blindness, my favorite band from Edmonton.
There's more than that. There's a lot more than that. I am in a kind of like an indie alt country Canadiana kind of band now. Where I play bass and I produce, called The Wasted Moments, and we just had a new 3-song EP come out. It's very schizophrenic.
And this is that song now. Mr. James Seabrook, thanks for being on the podcast. Take care. Thanks, everyone.